And we're live. How's everybody doing? Central Illinois. Hello. Maggie from San Diego. Glacier, Washington. Awesome. Hi, Ashley. Hey, Bob. Hello from Greece. Awesome. Very cool. Oregon. Chile. Beautiful. Maine. Portland, Maine. Las Vegas. Hi, Lisa. Ontario. Good to see you. Croatia. Awesome. Southern California. Switzerland. Very cool. Sweden. Awesome. Ohio. Massachusetts. Hi, Paul. The Gringo Scott Productions, New Mexico. From Muggy, Maryland. Okay. Berlin, Germany. Hey, Tom. Someone retracted a message. Donna. Hi, Donna. Hendersonville, North Carolina. Sunny Phoenix. I'm sure it's sunny there today. And New York City. Hey, Will. Hey, Frank. From Spain. Awesome. The Netherlands. Beautiful. Silicon Valley. All right. Alara. And North Carolina. Doing a retreat in North Carolina here in a few months. London. Yvonne. Hi, Yvonne. Kieran from London. Hey. Cornwall. Awesome. Very cool. Yorkshire, UK. Hi, Caroline. Lava Light from Atlanta. It's got to be hot down there today. Hi, from York. Beautiful. Hi, Anne. Saskatchewan. Oh, okay, I didn't realize that. Thanks, Ashley. Marcy from Arizona. Hey, Frankie. New York City. Cool. Love New York City. So, what do you guys want to see today? Talk about covertly toxic people, how to navigate without creating beliefs about who they are as a person. Hello from Richmond, Virginia. Hi from Murrieta. Not sure where that is. Mary Beth. Hey, Ryan. Belief is at the root of identity, but what exactly is a belief fundamentally? It's a thought that you react to habitually. What's the difference between a thought that's believed and one that isn't? Well, certainly a thought that's not recognized as a thought. There's some belief or identity around it. A thought that is seen clearly as a phenomenon, a mental phenomenon, or a phenomenon within consciousness that doesn't have any push or pull on any sense of a self, doesn't seem like it defines anything, reality, etc. That's just a thought. A belief usually is when we have a habituated reaction to it. But they're strung together. Beliefs are in like webs often. A wedding this afternoon. Okay. Do a meditation. Yeah, I can do that. Non-duality is closer all the time, and running chills my mind. But I feel like I may spin into the treadmill a good portion of the time. Thoughts on how to allow this, but not crash. I'm not sure I fully understand that question, honestly. Second the guided meditation. Okay, will do. Brad. Oh my gosh, that's a big message. That's great. I don't know what makes the messages big like that. I think it's a maybe, I don't know. Anyway, this is from Brad. Hello, I had an experience of pure terror after meditation. I welcomed it, but it overwhelmed me. I had to shake it off. What was that and what does it mean? It feels like a blessing now. Yeah, that sort of existential terror, fear that feels like it's just like in your bones. It's like shakes you to the core. Really, that's what is often experienced, not always, but often experienced when some degree of identity falls away, or we get a very clear experiential glimpse or an energetic glimpse of um, the illusion of identity and what comes with that, which is kind of like the whole world, at least the world as we know it. The world as we know it is structured in identity. It doesn't seem like it. Doesn't seem like everything is related to the sense of I or the sense of being a self or a someone, but it is. That sense of a self is like a gravitational body, and it has a gravitational effect on everything, all experience, thoughts, emotions, the way you see physical reality, even. And so when all of a sudden that shifts or something changes about it, or it's maybe momentarily seen through or threatened, then it seems like everything shakes. Like the whole foundation of your experience of everything it just kind of shifts a little bit. And the body mind doesn't have anything to make of that except for fear because it feels like it's you, right? It feels like, but even deeper than you. Like I said, it's not just you, it's everything in relation to you. Um, so it feels like something being threatened, like it's sort of death or something. That's the only way the body mind can interpret that. So it does interprets it through fear, and often fear is triggered by unknown or unexpected experiences. So all of that is kind of what's underlying it. In and of itself, it's not a problem, and it doesn't mean anything specific as far as um, doesn't say anything about you in particular. It can happen, doesn't always happen, can happen more than once, but it tends to be short lived. That's the good news. So I wouldn't make much of it. Just return to whatever feels relevant for you as far as practice or the way you approach all of this. And it may come back, it may not. If it does come back, sit with it a little longer if you can. Um, yeah. Retreat, meditation about dissolving in the senses. Okay. Can you explain your emphasis on the five senses? I don't quite get it. Okay. Managing thought storms when your mind is going 100 miles an hour and you're resisting every thought because they're so painful. Okay. Yeah. I feel you. I know what you mean. Okay. There's a lot of questions here. Okay. Let's start with this. Can you explain your emphasis on the five senses? I don't quite get it. So before I'll tell you a story about my own experience. I remember for me before awakening, I had no idea that this was the case until after awakening. But before awakening, I didn't see, feel, hear, or taste things accurately at all. It was very numb. It was very distanced, but I didn't know that at all. I had no idea because I only remembered my own way of understanding myself and seeing the world. Um, Perhaps distant past, like when I was a child, there was clarity there, but that's not remembered by the ego structures. The ego doesn't understand that, can't make anything of it, can't even see it. So it doesn't value that, right? So when as the ego starts to form, the sense of self, a part starts to form, it really does form a sort of contracted inner world. It's the best way I could say it. It's like a seemingly inner world. With that contraction, uh, we don't experience the sense fields accurately at all, or very distorted. But it's very hard to see that. Well, it's impossible to see it without any kind of awakening. But even after awakening, it can take some time to really, really see how distorted things actually are. So for me, I remember before awakening, it was like that tight inner world, felt really uncomfortable, lots of thoughts, felt very restricted, just uncomfortable, dysphoric. And I remember after noticing there was a huge like flip flop in the way I experience things. And I remember noticing this overtly, that thoughts used to seem so real. They weren't just like one thought popping up here and there. It was like my whole world was made out of thought. My whole inner world was like this thought structure, and I was stuck in it, and I was it. That's how it felt before. After, in contrast, it was like thoughts were, they're so far and they were like way in the background or something. And I could notice thoughts, but there was nothing reacting to them, grabbing on, pushing, pulling, believing. There was no sense of me in those thoughts anymore at all. Um, so the thoughts became very unimportant and not a big deal at all. In fact, almost easy to just not notice them. And the flip flop was that I noticed now, after awakening, that before I didn't feel, taste, see, I didn't experience the sense fields. I didn't experience the quote unquote actual world very clearly at all. It was not clear what that was. Now I was experiencing it all the time, directly, ongoing. And that was hugely surprising, because what it is, the actual, see, I'm now, when we're out of the mind, when we're out of the mind space, the egoic space, language really doesn't work. It just stops working. But I can try to talk about it. So I'm going to use terms that are inaccurate. Like, one is that there's a way it is. There's no way that it is, but the way it is vastly different than the world of thought. It's very paradoxical. It's quite empty in one sense. Empty meaning there's nothing to grab on, push or pull on. There's nothing solid. That there's nothing to take a position in regard to, such that it makes you feel real. That's just not there. So it's sort of empty, but it's also really intimate. It's like scintillating. It's um far more alive than that inner world of thought. And that's directly available through the senses. Of course. How else are you going to experience this? Like, without the five senses, right? So that's why I emphasize the senses in later stages of realization. That's the key, though. If it's really fleeting, like these experiences in the sense fields and working in the sense fields, if it just doesn't make any sense, if you're like, I just suffer constantly, I have tons of thoughts all the time, and I feel like that suffering person you describe, then I don't necessarily talk about working in the sense fields. I talk about either one pointed approach, doing self inquiry. Basically, what my book describes up towards the end is really working toward that Kensho experience, which actually is more helpful to shut the sense gates in that space, to focus attention completely in consciousness. So hopefully that's helpful. Kind of depends where you are in the whole awakening spectrum. Okay. Managing thought storms when your mind is going 100 miles per hour and you're resisting every thought because they're so painful. So thought storms are a real thing, right? They happen. We all can relate to that. So what do you do when there's just thought after thought after thought? First of all, I would suggest making the proclamation to yourself that right now there's a thought storm. That's what's happening. I can't do anything about it. Really digest that. You can't stop it. There's just a thought storm right now. Just like if there's a hurricane right now, you can't stop it by not wanting it, right? If there's a tornado, you can't stop it by not wanting it. So just see it for what it is at first. Just see, okay, there's thoughts. There's lots and lots of thoughts, and that's what's happening. All right. And take a minute with that, or take 5 minutes with that, or take a meditation round, just reminding yourself there's just thoughts. There's thoughts here. That's what's happening. I don't have to control it. And I can't control it if I wanted to. You know, let that digest. And then notice, or ask yourself, or inquire, okay, what is it that thinks this is a problem? Or why do I think this is a problem? Well, something might come like, I don't like it. Well, isn't that just another thought? I don't like all these thoughts. Isn't that another thought? Right. So don't use thoughts overtly or inadvertently to try to stop other thoughts. That's never going to work. And what it does, it kind of multiplies thoughts, or it kind of keeps it going a little bit. I think it kind of stirs the pot a bit. Again, if a massive thought storm moves in, it's not like you decided to have that happen and you can't decide for it to go away right now. It will go away, of course. Everything goes away. So, so yeah, the second part is like, look into it. What are your beliefs about this right now? Or if that's too vague, what are my beliefs about it? You can ask, why is this a problem? Because I'm obviously perceiving it as a problem if I'm struggling with it or asking Angelo or whatever. Like there's something in there that's perceiving that this shouldn't be this way, that it's a problem. So why is it a problem? You know, maybe you'll arrive at the conclusion that it's a problem because I can't keep track of the thoughts when they come so fast. Oh, interesting. Okay. Do I need to keep track of thoughts at all? Right. If there's a storm, do you need to keep track of every drop of rain, every bolt of lightning, every thunderclap? It's just what the storm is made of, you know? Like, do you really have to keep track of anything at all? Right? There may be fear there. I'm afraid that if I don't pay attention to my thoughts, then something. You may not even know what you're afraid of as far as the outcome of that. But if you look at it, you might be afraid, like, if I can't focus on my thoughts, what am I going to focus on? Well, that's a great question, right? So when you start asking these kinds of questions, often you're starting to delve into the mechanism of why. Well, I'll say it this way: you're starting to explore the mechanism of disidentifying from thoughts, because it's not uncommon when we disidentify somehow, either through practice, through sustained meditation, through a shift in experience or something. We disidentify from thoughts. It's very common that seems like there's a lot of thoughts all of a sudden. A lot more seem to be coming. And I caution people on this with first retreats that have never been to retreat, or even if you have, that it's pretty common after a couple hours of meditating that first day or even this first couple days that you notice, like, man, there's a lot of thoughts, right? But that's a good thing, because if you don't notice there's a lot of thoughts, you're just like identified with them. Probably you're completely identified with the thoughts. You are the thoughts, and don't realize like how much mental activity is actually going on. So when you start to notice lots and lots of thoughts coming, you're probably in a moment or a period of disidentifying, which is great. Doesn't feel good maybe, because what we're used to is holding on to thoughts, having them structured in some way that feels predictable and like I'm in control and all that. But that's like la la land, right? That's totally an illusion. So you're breaking that illusion. It's like when you break a fever, it's uncomfortable. So that's what's really going on underneath it all. But it doesn't come when you want it to. That's the thing. Sometimes it comes out of the blue. Um, so those are some approaches. The last thing I'll offer is sometimes it's just a very strong emotion underneath all of it, and you're not really in touch with it. So you can ask yourself, what am I feeling? Is it an emotion? Am I feeling some sadness, grief? Am I feeling angry at something, someone, frustrated about something in life, circumstances, a person? You can ask yourself those kinds of questions. And if it's not clear, you can always say, well, what are the circumstances of my life right now? Like, did I just lose a job? That kind of can give you a clue. Or maybe you're experiencing fear, of the unknown or something. So you can kind of explore to see if there's an emotion underneath it that's just being like really avoided. But that's not always the case necessarily. It's just something to consider. Okay. The big messages are either from subscriber milestones or super chats. Oh, cool. Okay. I can't tell. Oh, okay. It says member for 4 months. So that means it's Brad's birthday, for 4-month birthday on the channel. Thank you for your support. Meditation. Okay, we can do it. We did the 5 senses, thought storms. Chat with Josh. That was good, huh? Yeah, it's kind of fun. The hard thing is I could just disappear in those moments, like not talk at all. It's very easy to not have any structured experience of reality. So I have to keep a little bit of, I guess, cognition going to to actually have a conversation. But yeah, I love talking with Josh. Okay. Do you know of any good retreats or teachers in Europe? Lisa Carnes does retreats on occasion. I think she's good. Rupert Spira, I don't. I actually I know someone who's been to his retreats and said they were good. Um, who else might be in Europe? Some other people could put some suggestions here, but offhand, I'm not thinking of anyone else at the moment. Nargis, Nargis, I think she might be having some kind of retreat coming up. Okay, Ashley's question is, why does the need for more silence arise as the journey progresses? I'm introverted, so I naturally love silence and time alone, but it feels like this is even more important now. I would agree with that. Um, how can I say it? There's actually a lot of answers to this question. Um, Trying to think of which answers to give. Okay, so part of it is that it's it's skillful at some point early on in this process to make a point of having time alone, in solitude, in meditation, in contemplation, inquiry, whatever. So having a solitary meditative practice can be really helpful because we're often so engaged all the time, right? Very, very engaged with people and all of it. So sometimes we need that to break the patterns, even like simple patterns, but also toxic patterns that we may have by interacting with other people in certain ways. So and then retreat is great. If you ever do a silent retreat where you really don't interact with anyone for a week, you learn a lot about yourself. You learn often how kind of addicted you are to interacting with people, even if you don't do it super frequently. There's still something very alluring about it. And this leads probably into the second reason. The second reason is one of the things I think humans do, I'd say the thing humans do the most that keeps them re-identifying is interacting with other people. A lot of communication is um, really about identity. It's really about reinforcing identities, whether we know that or not. Not all of it, but a lot of it is. So the clearer you see this, the more you see, I think, that often certain kinds of communication you maybe have been interested in before, they're just not interesting anymore. So then sometimes people who you only communicate that way with, you're just less inclined to be around them, right? So like you may have a friend that you always complain about things with, as an example, or gossip, or the really unhelpful types of communication, right? That are probably kind of bad for you. So these kinds of things tend to fall away earlier on, or maybe later on, but that's part of it. So that certain types of communication we're used to that just aren't really that valuable, and can be counterproductive actually with this process. You may find you're not interested in those kinds of conversations, and you may be surprised how many of those there are, how much that actually goes on. So that's part of it. And then even at a subtler level, you'll see that even people I think who are um, quite healthy psychologically and emotionally healthy, there's still something in the conversations that talks about that reinforces identity. We talk in terms of time and doership. It's a lot of what we actually talk about, right? So um, on the flip side, I think this is why people will often say they love retreat so much, and they always have trouble when they leave becoming like re-identified or back in the mind, because when we're in retreat, the language I use is so different. Purposely, of course, I can speak in tradition conventional ways just as easily, but this language I use is very specifically designed to help people disidentify. I'm not giving the ego anything, and I'm taking it away, if anything. It's one way of saying it, but I also do guided meditations. We do a lot of silent sitting. Uh, Other retreats, similarly, you're just not given the usual context you have and the usual tools you have to keep that ego structure just constantly revitalizing itself. And these are language tools, basically. So you're not given those. You don't have them. And at first can be really uncomfortable, but once you get into the depths of retreat, it feels so good because it's such a release from the usual. And then you go back into the regular world, and very quickly you feel you may not you're not completely re-identified, and you haven't like lost the clarity from retreat, but very quickly you see how sticky conversation is with the mind how quickly the mind can get bound up into that stuff, and how quickly your attention just keeps going up there, going into those concepts and mental processes. Um, so that kind of contrast accentuates what I'm talking about. Um, and I think a third, hopefully that's clear, but a third reason actually, I think, is that's probably the most common among people who are deeply realized or even liberated and so forth, is that although your own suffering ends, this is a very paradoxical, although your own suffering ends completely, as the self structure ends completely, the seeming separate self, it's just seen completely through, and it's not like a change in paradigms. It's like the it's like paradigms themselves don't function anymore. So it's just you just are experiencing what is. Um, in that, even though there's really not personal suffering, it doesn't mean you don't feel, and it doesn't mean you don't feel empathically. So you feel everything other people feel, interestingly. So like I can feel suffering with another person very directly. I know it's paradoxical, but it's the way it is. And when I talk to others like this, they tend to agree with this. So so what happens is it's not, and what's really weird is there's not an avoidance anymore. So you don't avoid it. You don't avoid people because they make you suffer. That's like an earlier stage where you have that kind of Zen stink where you judge, like secretly judge people, or you want them to wake up because it's just uncomfortable being around them. Well, even those filters go away. So you can't even think anything's wrong with it. You're just so immersed in it. It's just what's happening. And yet there's an intelligence to the body mind that knows that, right? So you tend to avoid, um, I wouldn't say avoid, you tend to gravitate away from over time situations where you're going to feel a lot of other people's pain, um, with no good purpose. It's very different if there's a sort of purpose to it energetically. So energetically, I'm happy to come into retreat and feel people's pain with them, to go right into wherever they are when they do the Q&A, right? This is when this happens mostly, is like I'm right where they are. I feel what you feel. I don't feel it like from here as a teacher. I feel it as you. And so I'm more than happy to go there, more than willing to go there, because you have the buy-in. You want to wake up. You are waking up. It's happening. There's nothing in me that would not want to do that. So I'm always available for that in one sense. But if the interaction with somebody, where the sort of cost of it is you're going to feel all their pain, and you also feel that they don't want to not feel, they don't want to wake up from it, um, you may gravitate away from people like that to some degree. That's the best way I can say it. Everyone's situation is different. Some of that may be in your family, and you're not going to gravitate away from them. But some of it may be so toxic in your family that you will gravitate away from your family. So everyone's situation is different in the relative sense. But I think those three things are probably the most salient points around why we tend to become more solitary or just enjoy solitary time. Now, it varies because like I'm around people a lot. But in my free time, it's really nice when it's totally free time, which isn't a lot, but I have some. It's nice to just be around people who are very empty, or very not a lot of pushing and pulling and drama and heady conversations and feeling their repression. Like I don't do that for a pastime, feel people's repression. I do it for a like a vocation, I guess, in this sense. But yeah, given the choice, I would either sit by myself, meditate, be with animals, dogs, nature, or people who are sort of empty-ish, if that helps. Hold all that lightly. That's just kind of shooting off the cuff, shooting from the cuff. Okay. Let me roll up here a bit and see where we're at. Okay, Louise K has a retreat in Europe and it's recommended. It's in Spain, which is probably a beautiful place to go to a retreat. Well, that's cool. It looks like YouTube periodically gives each of us a free member milestone chat. I'm using mine to tell you that since you asked about it. Perfect. I didn't even know that was a thing. Okay, where are we at? Paul. Haven't yet had Ken show. but have been working for some time on experiencing just the sensation in the feeling and the hearing. Okay. Can this not help toward Kensho? It can help for sure. Anything can help. Um, as I said a moment ago, actually, like often when we're approaching Kensho, I'll often point people to like closing the sense gates and focusing attention more into the I sense, into consciousness, into who am I, or into a one pointed approach like a koan. But people wake up all different ways. So I can't tell you what you're doing won't work. That's you're not going to hear me say something like that. Um, what I can do is sort of say this is what seems to work the most for most people, but everyone's different. Everyone's different. If it feels relevant to you, if it feels potent, if it quiets the mind, that's awesome. Just be alert for any background thought identities. Just keeping doesn't take much actually to keep that thread of identity intact. They can just be a little something in back going, I'm listening to sounds, like feeling like the one who's listening to sounds, feeling like the one who's practicing, feeling like the one's getting deeper, right? Or whatever. Just be a little alert for that because that's what we go directly after when we do practices like a one-pointed approach or self-inquiry. We're going right after that root of identity in the mind specifically because this whole thing is about the mind, the thinking mind, the thought system, the ego structures. That's what this is all about as far as what gets in the way of without that you wouldn't need awakening, you wouldn't need liberation, you'd already be liberated. So that's where the money is, in my opinion, at all levels. Is some level of belief is operating. It can be a very fundamental non-conceptual belief, preconceptual, as happens later in later stages, like a belief that there's a such thing as separation at all, division at all. But it's still a belief. Ultimately, you won't find that in the sense fields. It's just not there, right? So, can you go directly to the sense fields and all that other stuff will unbind itself? Sure, can happen. So, yeah, just reading some things about retreats. Got an email this morning, Rupert Spira, Lisa B. As I got more used to the idea that thoughts don't really tell the truth, it got easier to observe them and even their painful reactions. I could appreciate them as an energetic experience. Yeah, totally. And what you can also do is when you start to see thoughts as thoughts, you can realize that the reaction, like she mentioned a painful reaction here, or he or she, I don't know who that is. You have a painful reaction to a thought. You can actually realize that's another thought, but that's a belief or a hidden thought. And that basically just says, I don't like that thought. I don't like the thought I'm reacting to. That's what it is. It's a belief. Then once you sort of maybe internally verbalize that belief, oh my gosh, I have a thought that says I don't like that thought. So thoughts are just saying I don't like other thoughts and this thought doesn't like that thought. There's no one in that. There's no one who's experiencing that. Don't conclude that, but look for it. See, is that all that is? Thoughts reacting to thoughts? And when you see that, you may notice the visceral reaction to all of that is just not there anymore. There's no identity. There's no thread of identity holding itself to that process. They're just a process. Yeah. You can also look at it like this. Instead of like trying to change your beliefs, question your beliefs directly, you can just notice with any thought or belief, which is a thought that you didn't realize was a thought until you do. You can look at any of those as a simple statement or a view, let's say, and you can actually sort of tell yourself, I really don't know if that's true or not. Could be true, could be false, doesn't matter. Could be true, could be false, doesn't matter. If it's true now, it could be different in 5 minutes, could be different tomorrow, doesn't matter, right? Just see that there's not really truth value to thoughts in the way we think there is. You can except when you relate it to another thought. Then there's like relative truth value based on another thought or another belief, but it's just this web of beliefs. With what we're doing here, we're not working in the relative world. We're not trying to figure out which beliefs are better for planting a garden because there are certainly some approaches to planting a garden which make more sense than others. But this is not about that. This is seeing that fundamental, what's that seeming fundamental experience of identifying with thoughts is not fundamental, actually. It seems like it is, but it's not. It's fundamental to itself. It's fundamental to the thought system, the thought world, but it's not fundamental to reality. And reality just goes so far beyond that, the unconditioned, let's say, which is neither real nor unreal, neither permanent nor impermanent. Okay. That's fun. You're welcome, Life with Kyle. I think you're thinking me or someone else. No, you're thinking someone else. Okay. Louise, how did you manage to go about your days? How did I manage to go about my days? Talk to friends, loved ones just after liberation. And the self dropped. It was so easy. It's so easy. Like, what is it in there? I'm not picking on you, but this is a very common sort of question. Um, what is it in there that's going, I won't know how to talk to people? That's like an extension of the part of us that believes that there's something to get out of talking to people, something important there, something more real there than there is in the sound of the bird, the feeling of the feet on the ground. There's just nothing important there in talking to people, in identifying and like backward extrapolating a self from other seeming selves. It's just communication. It's just words, you know. And so, in fact, it gets easier. In one sense, it gets easier because you don't believe it anymore. You see how it's just like kind of like as Josh would maybe describe. It's like play. There's nothing real or unreal about it. So it does. You can talk about whatever. It doesn't matter. So it was very liberating. Pardon the pun. Well, I don't know if that's a pun when it's like literally true. The are there any thoughts that should be believed or followed? Sure. Yeah. It's a little hard of a thing to answer because if there's a thought corresponding to something that's, say, danger related, like say you're okay. Here's an example. Say you're driving and you stop at a stoplight and someone starts approaching your car at night. You're alone on the street and they have a knife in their hand. Well, let's say they just look suspicious. And they want you to roll your window down. You may have a thought that goes, "Oh, this guy is creepy. I'm scared. I got to get out of here." You may have that thought, but that's not why you're going to get out of there. You're going to get out of there because you saw it. The processing happens unconsciously or below the conscious level of thought. So you don't need to have that thought to hit the gas accelerator and get the hell out of there, right? But when we think theoretically like this, when we start getting into meta thought and thinking about situations and stuff that aren't happening right now, we often go, well, what about this and what about that? It makes it seem very justifiable that we have to listen to certain thoughts and not others. But I'm telling you, in a serious situation, or I like, Eckhart Tolle has the example of not putting your hand on the stove. He's like, you probably did it at one time, you touched something hot and you knew from then on, but you don't have to think about it all the time. You don't have to walk around the kitchen going, don't put your hand on the stove. Don't put your hand on the stove. You're not going to put your hand on the stove because your body won't let you. Yeah. It's that kind of a thing. Hopefully that's helpful. Okay. That's a good question though. Really. And if you're unsure, like let's say we can think of another example. I'm thinking of a direct danger example. Let's think of another example. Like I'm in a relationship that may not be healthy. It's been a long time. I don't know if that maybe it's kind of abusive or something, right? Maybe you have that thought and you're like contemplating it. Like I don't really know. Um, Even then, it's kind of true that things are sort of bad enough unless you have a really dysfunctional pattern of staying in violent situations. Things get bad enough, you're probably just going to leave, no matter how much you did or didn't think about it. But what I can tell you is, if you want practical advice in a situation, say like that, I would say ask somebody you trust. Ask a third party, get an objective view. Because one thing's thoughts are not, and that's objective. They're subjective by nature. So when you're triggered, when there's intense emotions, when there's a lot on the line, that's when it's very hard to trust thoughts. It's really hard to know whether they're even true or not. It could be completely wrong or distorted. So sometimes it's just helpful to talk to somebody you trust, get a third person point of view, something like that in a practical sense. Okay. The path has been oriented toward practices. This is from Bill. Meditation, doctrine. I like it. Practices, meditation, doctrine. It's a good place to start. The past few months, it has swung heavily to a heart focus. I love it. Seeking feels terrible. Good. Tools clumsy, yet intuition seems almost too simple. That's great. Too simple is a thought. Don't sell yourself short. Intuition's powerful, especially heart-based intuition. Especially when your heart-based intuition isn't like imagining something and then believing that's your intuition, right? God told me to go to the casino and gamble. Whatever. Not that anyone's ever told me that. I promise. No, they have. So intuition isn't a thought, right? And you're describing it very well. For you, intuition is not a thought. It's a heart-based experience. Seeking feels uncomfortable, terrible. I think you're in a good place. That's awesome. Okay, Ashley says, thought storm is how I described the first full day of retreat last year in North Carolina. Totally. I had never heard my brain scream like that before. And, yeah, can't even put into words how it felt. And so I usually use this example of retreat because it's a pretty extreme version of going quiet, more than we're used to. But it does amp up. So if you sit on your own for 30 minutes or an hour a day, let's say, you usually notice there's thoughts right at the beginning of sitting, and then the mind calms and you calm down. When you go to retreat, it's a whole different animal. It's like you don't realize how many buried thoughts are still defining your experience even when you're meditating, until you try to meditate for a longer period where you give yourself no escape routes. Then it's like, whoa, my head is like full. It just feels like ghosts. Like there's just so much going on in there, and thought after thought after thought, and strange things. Um, that's what people often experience the first time they do a retreat, or even the second, third, and fourth time they do a retreat. The beauty of it is like at some point it calms down. It's like, wow, I don't need any of that, man. I don't need any of that stuff. Things are so simple. Then they become beautiful. Beauty radiates from everything. Footsteps, breath, even painful emotions, what we would call painful emotions usually. Even that starts to radiate a sort of beauty to it, intrinsically to the experience. So retreat is a very, very valuable thing. People ask reasonably commonly something along the lines of, I've been doing this, and this, but something feels really stuck. I don't feel like I'm making progress anymore, or never have, either way. What should I do? And the two things I usually explore with them, because they're just potent. One is retreat. Even if you can't afford an in-person retreat, you can do an online retreat, right? You can even do a self-structured retreat. Hard to do on your own if you're not used to meditating a lot, but you can get a friend to do it and do it with somebody else to hold each other accountable. But a retreat is number one. Usually, I say try that. That's a massive pattern interrupt of all your usual ways of being, thinking about yourself, habituated everything, right? Behaviors, patterns, thoughts, all of it. It's a major pattern interrupt. Retreat is a good retreat, a silent retreat. Number two is working one-on-one with somebody, anyone who's clear, liberated, hopefully. That's a very potent, or just be around somebody, if you have a friend or whatever, but that's a very potent thing as well to approach. And both of those, specifically the second one, can often break people out of this self-imposed, it's not even a real fixation, or they're not really stuck, but they believe they're stuck, and the belief is strong, and the belief in stuckness in one sense is the stuckness. But often it's very smart people who do this, really like highly intelligent people who do this to themselves. And so it's really good to expose them to somebody who doesn't have ego structures, because they've never felt that kind of energy. They don't know what that's like. And the funny thing is, it doesn't matter who the person they're interacting with, or how intelligent the person they're interacting with is. It doesn't matter at all. It's just not on that scale. It's not about intelligence. It's not about smarts. It's not about learning at all. Not about understanding at all. It's direct. Just like in, say, what Mahayana Buddhism would be like, direct mind to mind transmission is what matters. And that happens, So those are the two areas I might suggest to somebody to consider. Teachers, you can find them. If you're really work hard at it. There are teachers you can find online that will charge, because that's what they do for a living, and that's just the way it is. It's fine. But some people don't have even money for that. If you don't have any money at all, you can still find people online. Um, look around, find or even in you know interact with people who are serious about this. And if you're really ready for that, like as they say, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. I find that to be very much the case. So anyway, a couple things to look into. Someone says, I am curious how emotions can attach themselves to thoughts. I wouldn't say it that way. Emotions attaching themselves to thoughts. Here's what I would say. When you experience an intense emotion, the natural course of that, the natural way that could play out, would play out without identity, is it fully immerses you, takes you, takes you right into it. You don't feel fear, you become fear. You don't feel anger, you become anger. You don't feel sadness, you become sadness. And everyone experiences that in deeper realization. They say it literally that way often. Wow, I've never felt fear like this. They've even gone through a fear barrier, an intense short-term fear barrier with really single pointed inquiry. But then later on, when you feel more of a conventional feel more of a conventional emotion, sadness, grief, or fear, or whatever, just in the flow of life, it's like, whoa, I used to be able to just sidestep this, think my way out of it somehow. It doesn't happen now. I just can't do it. It's like I just feel this intense sadness, such that you are the sadness. You feel like that energy signature, right? That's how I would describe emotion. So, how do thoughts relate to that? Well, earlier on, when your mind identified, when I was mind identified for sure, because there was so much emotional repression, I didn't even know what I was I didn't even know I was feeling most of the time. I didn't really know. I was so in my head, so many thoughts. And if you asked me about feeling or emotion, I probably could talk about it, right? Because I have all kinds of thoughts about that, right? I can talk and talk and talk about it. But that's how the ego structure uses thoughts to completely avoid emotion. So I wouldn't say an emotion comes and then ties itself to a thought or anything like that. I would say emotion is natural. It's natural to feel grief when there's loss. That's just a natural thing. Um, Not that thoughts are unnatural, but they are, let's call it the ego's coping mechanism to make sure you don't feel emotion too intensely. That's kind of what they do. Once the disidentification starts happening, where we have periods where we're not completely intertwined with thoughts. Once that starts happening, um, then it's less like complete numbness and sidestepping every emotion without even realizing it. It's more like, whoa, a lot of thoughts come when I feel emotions now, right? So it's a remnant of the old system of mechanism that's trying to get you even more mind identified when there's a thought to really avoid it. So you're breaking the pattern of avoidance essentially, and that can come with a lot of thoughts. Later on, it doesn't come with thoughts. You may feel an intense emotion, but there aren't really thoughts about it. You can even see the storyline, but you see that's a thought. Oh, I feel sadness because so and so, whatever, left or something. And you can feel it so full on. And you can see the story, but the story is like uninteresting. As someone said a few comments ago, seeking becomes uncomfortable. It's like that with thoughts. Like using a thought to avoid an intense emotion right now becomes doesn't at some point you can't do it at all, but it also kind of progresses toward that to where there are times when it's like maybe you could, but it feels so wrong somehow. You'd rather just feel the emotion fully. And then the emotion itself starts to be essentially enjoyable at some point. Okay. Someone said I had a glimpse of no self while reading Gateless Gatecrashers. I love that title, but I could not repeat this. No. Did not manage to get there again. Can't get back anywhere you've never left. Yeah. You might ask yourself, how much do I believe the statement that I can't get back to that? Does it feel real? Feels true, doesn't it? But it's not what it's a Trojan horse. That thought carries with it a belief that says, I, as a me, went into this thing called no self and came back out of it. That doesn't make sense, right? Like, it doesn't make sense, but somehow it feels very true, right? That I can't get it back. Do you think it's still not there? Like, do you think no self occurred and then stopped occurring? Or do you think the sense of self subsided for a moment and then came back and started talking about how that self can get back to no self, right? Keep at it. Don't worry about no self for now, anyway. Worry about making your mind so singular, like a singularity, that nothing is overlooked, nothing is managed, nothing is pushed or pulled on. Becomes super, super fascinating experientially. Yvonne says, that was Estrella. I'm going to think that's the way you say your name. Okay, next one is Yvonne. Recommendation for retreat in Europe. Okay, cool. Tina, you once recited the Heart Sutra. How can I find that to experience those words again? Gosh, I have it recited in several places, but I can't think of where they are. I've done it on videos. I've done it in retreats. Maybe I'll just make a video of it. I've had that request. I probably should just do that. I'll make a video of it soon, in the next day or two. Ulala says, some people like Francis Lucille, who often has European retreat in Europe in summer. Okay. I was going to mention his name, but I wasn't sure if he's still in Europe or. As many non-dual teachers, he doesn't support regular meditations, which I think is a mistake for focus. Yeah. I don't know why some like Neo-Advaita people don't like the idea of meditation, but that's okay. It's not necessary. I know that. Ashley, this makes a whole lot of sense. Thank you for your answer. You're very welcome. Very welcome, Ashley. Nice to see you. Make sure you introduce yourself to me when we're at the retreat in North Carolina, because I don't think I remember meeting you. Maybe I did, but I met so many people, but I didn't connect you to this. But I see your comments frequently. Okay. This is Leah. I really struggle with reactivity when it comes to parenting. Yeah, boy, kids will trigger the reactivity, right? Can't seem to figure out what is appropriate. One thing is to see, so reactivity with parenting often results in anger. Anger is the one, right? It can be helpful to explore with yourself for a while. I almost don't want to say too much and let you sort through it. Explore for a while. What is your fear when you get triggered with a kid, right? So, typical thing is they're acting up, they're doing things you don't want them to do, they're being defiant or seemingly being defiant, whatever it is. And we get upset, we get angry, we want to like physically hold them in place or something. Sometimes we're just so frustrated with whatever's going on. But look at your process about it and ask yourself, why do I think this is such a problem right now? Why does this seem like such a big deal? And then you can even ask, what am I afraid of here? What am I afraid of about them? What am I afraid of about me? That can be helpful, I think. And get back to me if that is helpful to you and you've seen something with it. When it comes to expressing my kids and expressing emotion, correcting my kids and expressing emotion. One thing I think that's really cool tip for parenting is I think a lot of very well-intentioned and great parents don't realize that even pretty small kids really understand things well if you explain it to them, and really break down like why we're doing what we're doing, why we teach a kid, for instance, to be nice to another child and helping them understand like what the other kid might feel like and what it felt like to them when they had someone at school that wasn't nice to them. And like just getting really detailed about why we're asking them to do things we're asking them to do. I think that can be really helpful for sure. But it takes patience. Sometimes we have so much to do. We don't have the time to sit down and do that. We feel like sometimes. So it's like, no, I just need you to listen to me right now or whatever. But that goes a long way with kids. Okay. Someone asked Bill how heart focus manifests for him. We'll see if that answer comes up. Thomas or Tomas retreats in England and Sweden. Paul Hercombe. Okay. I haven't heard of Paul Hercombe, but we'll trust you. Someone says, I have a strong urge to be alone and sit quiet. I love it. But I work in medicine full time. I know what you mean. Married, 2 young kids. Any practical tips on lessening habitual mind identification while with others? I wish I could. Give you an easier answer for this than the one I'm going to give you. But I'm going to just be honest with you. That tends to go away later on in realization. The reactions to people, reactions around people, the challenges with interpersonal interactions, the stress that comes of it. That stuff actually doesn't dissolve right away. I mean, you may have a big relief from it after an awakening, for sure, for a while, but then it kind of comes back in spades. You can't ignore it. So it takes time. It really does. But practical tips on lessening habitual mind identification while around others. Two things I'll offer. Um, Three things I'll offer. One is they're kind of unrelated a little bit, but they're related a little bit. One is really try to act with love toward another, even if you don't know them very well. And what I mean by that is just really look at like what can I offer them in this conversation? How can I add value? How can I think in terms of them instead of me, what I'm nervous about, etc. It could be giving honest appreciation for something about them, vulnerable on your end, honest appreciation about something about them. But it does rewire the way you think about people when you're interacting with them and whether it's really heavy or not. So one is like really try to think in terms of them and consider each interaction a challenge to be able to give, for you to give. And try that habitually, like challenge yourself for 30 days to do that or something. That's one way. Another way is to really, really listen to what they're saying. Like, and that does go with number one. It's kind of like the gift of being completely open to what people are telling you. You don't have to agree with it necessarily, but just really listening at every level. Listening to what the information they're giving, listening whether they're trying to make rapport with you, listening to whether there's underlying sadness, maybe listening to whether um, they feel confused about communication themselves, listen to whether they may have social anxiety, and maybe you're picking it up a little bit, feeling it, but it's theirs. Listen at every level, like really, really listen to people. The third thing is put your attention in the senses. As someone's speaking, put your attention right into your body. Find where it is in the center line, chakra line, maybe in your head, maybe in your neck, maybe in your chest or gut, maybe in your pelvis, depending on the kind of conversation or the person. But find out where that energy is in your body, where you're feeling something, and keep some of your attention there as you're interacting. And then as the visual field starts to become non-dual, then it's a different thing. It's just right there. You're looking at them, but you're also looking at what's not them at all. You're looking at energy. And that's very interesting. Okay. NS asked a question. Is a devotional path useful? It's an interesting question because it's not really my path. I relate to, it's funny, I relate to the devotional path probably least of other types of paths. Um, but I wouldn't say I have never have a devotional bone in my non-existent body. Um, it just doesn't resonate with me as much. And I think this is just me, really. This doesn't have to be anyone else's opinion or belief. I think for me, it had a lot to do with when I was younger, and I just saw there's something off about people who talked about religion to me. Probably the people I came in contact with or whatever, but it just seemed off. There's something about it that just seemed. It's not like I said, "Oh, I'm not interested in God" or something. It just I could tell it wasn't about God. It was like they were using a word called God, but what they were really talking about was control or trying to talk you into something. Or that was my feeling of it. Felt like people more than God, So I didn't really have an opinion around it. Um, but I didn't feel like it was the path for me to find liberation. I felt like it was more of the problem to me. So that's how I felt about it. People who are very heart based, like really, really heart based, I might and they're inclined toward the devotional approach. I won't talk about anything they want to do. If they want to reify it as God or um, Jesus or whatever, it's all fine with me. But I might suggest that if someone's very heart based, moves from the heart, um, to turn that sort of devotional um, tendency onto presence itself, onto what's actually here, right? What's right in front of your face, the tree, the plant, the breath, your own emotions when you're suffering and hurting. That's God. One version of God, one form of God. Yeah. Recognize your own divine nature. And there's absolutely a component of grace to all of this. But just my instinct isn't like the grace from a God, from a person or a seeming person shaped deity. I just don't have that. I don't hooked up that way. But there's no doubt that grace um, plays a huge role in this. Also, the closest thing for me to deities are something like archetypes or bodhisattvas. And to me, those are very real. In fact, I think they're more real than what well, I know they're more real than what we take ourselves to be. But in one sense, they have more reality even than the physical world we agree upon. But I will say it's because they have one foot in human consciousness, not because of identity either, because of compassion, because it's not a comfortable place to be. I remember hearing years ago, this is like loved hearing this. I was like, yes, 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 yes. Someone said there was an exchange about what a bodhisattva is, and if someone were to ask what a bodhisattva is, it's someone um, whose only remaining attachment is to liberating others, right? And if a Christian, maybe let's say, or Western theologically oriented person would say, well, where do you think that bodhisattva is going after they die, heaven or hell? The answer is clear and obvious. The bodhisattva will go to hell because that's where the most hell is needed. Most help is needed. I resonate with that. So there's some very powerful archetypes and bodhisattvas in various forms, and they're all around you. Actually, they're not always people. So be open to that. This is devotional as well. Being open to things you will never understand. There's more of this in the Old Testament, in a sense. The burning bush, looking into the burning bush and turning away is just so powerful, right? Or Ezekiel, I think it was Ezekiel looking into the sky, the different types of angels that were described. He was like enraptured but afraid, like turning away because the power was just so much. Those are archetypes to me. Yeah. Okay. If anyone has follow-up questions on devotional stuff, let me know. Do you find there's a difference between inquiring, "What is this?" or "Who am I?" For me, "Who am I?" makes no sense whatsoever to me. It's like asking it's like looking at the ground and going, "How deep is that hole?" And there's no hole there. That's kinda what it's like for me. "What is this?" makes a lot more sense to me experientially right now, but if someone has a strong sense of I, or hasn't examined the self structure at all, "Who am I?" may be a great question. Could be, "What am I?" even. What matters is what works. So, is there a difference? Sure, there's differences between all approaches in one way of speaking. But the biggest difference that matters is the difference between people. So find what works for you. What leads you into the wordless, into the mysterious, beyond thought, but not apart from thought, or directly penetrating thought, such that nothing stirs in the mind anymore. What does that for you? Try different things and see. Maybe a person, maybe an interaction, maybe a video, maybe a technique or an inquiry question. But inquiry in one form or another is often the key. It's a good question. Okay. I don't know if it's Caitlin or Catalin, but I'm just going to say Catalin. Is it valuable to observe non-doership without an initial awakening? My experience is it can bring relief when it's noticed there's guilt or blame. I think that's really a good approach. That's the use of it, especially when you intuitively realize it's not. It's accurate. When even if it's not obvious all the time, if some intuition says, "Yeah, I see that. I see that there's really no agent. There's thoughts of agency, but it's not an agent." So if you intuit that that's true, it can be a very powerful way to apply to things, especially when there's blame, resentment, or guilt. Because blame, resentment, and guilt all have to do with apparent choices, actions, and people, me or another person. So yeah. Okay. The sound of a bird is not as important as awareness of climate change. There isn't a hierarchy of thoughts. The sound of a bird is not as important as awareness of climate change. The sound of a bird is more important than awareness of climate change. The, for anyone to actually hear the sound of a bird once in their lifetime, to really hear it, is more than all the knowledge in the world on climate change that you could accumulate. Doesn't mean that climate change isn't an issue. It is. Maybe the most important issue facing us as humanity. Okay. Marvin asks, I like challenging questions, by the way. Those things are I like it. People don't always ask the challenging ones. Well, actually, people ask challenging questions all the time, but that was a pretty good one. Okay. Marvin, I've heard so many teachers talk about thoughts quieting down during a retreat, but I've done several and it's the opposite. Yeah. The thought storms get worse and worse. Okay. So, Marvin, there's a thought in you. There's something in you that's just does not want thoughts there at all. It's the resistance, actually. It doesn't matter if they're there or not. But if you've gone through retreat after retreat and they just get worse and worse and more thoughts, um, how can I say this? First of all, your experience isn't wrong either. Everyone's experience is just right for them. You have to see what you have to see. What I saw that broke it open, and what Joe Schmo saw that broke it open, don't matter to you. What matters to you is what you're going to see, and it's like really close. It's really, I can feel it. It's really close. There's something you're identifying with. Why are thoughts a problem? I'll just answer it, but I want you to explore it yourself in different ways. The 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 reason thoughts are a problem is because we believe they're a problem. We are identified ourself as a thought. That's the problem. So there's always going to be some reactivity to thoughts, and they're going to feel problematic until we really break that first seal. There's something in there that's just wanting to fixate on thoughts, even though it hates it. It's a belief. Look for it. Feel into it. You got to see this from a completely different angle. You will. I know you will. Or talk to me during the retreat if you're ever at one of my retreats. Come up for Q&A. Okay. Ryan, how does happiness fit into all this? How do you define it? Does realization seem to enhance it? You may notice that I don't talk about happiness a lot. Some traditions talk about it all the time. It's all a matter of happiness. Find your natural happiness, your natural bliss, etc. I think I know what they're talking about. And I think some of it is a mistranslation. But it really comes down to what you mean by happiness. That's what this whole discussion or question hinges on, right? So much of what we take to be happiness, when there's ego, when there's self-structure, selfing, so much of what we take to be happiness is very situational. We're happy because things went the way we thought we wanted them to, one way or another. That person I was attracted to likes me now. I won something, just throwing examples out. I got a raise at work. I finally hit an achievement or milestone. All of those are fine. There's nothing wrong with any of those. But most of what I think we call happiness is very situational, and it's tied into the doer, the feeling that I did something. That's why when there's a major disruption in your expectations, which I might call a tragedy often, it opens things up like almost nothing else can. Because you can't lie to yourself anymore that you're creating reality or controlling reality with your expectations. That is just taken away from you. And it opens up so much. I don't even remember what the question was. I don't really remember what I started talking about in that sentence. All right. Oh, happiness. So there's a different kind of when I think when some spiritual traditions talk about happiness being like kind of there all the time or baseline, they probably mean something like I could be wrong, but I think they probably mean something like equanimity, which sometimes is interpreted as bliss, or peace. Peace is what people really want, I think. I mean, you want what you want, of course, but when you want something in the relative sense, you want it from a mistaken perspective already. So that's why when you get it, it doesn't usually satisfy. So you either just keep chasing more stuff, bigger stuff, more stuff, whatever. You get disillusioned. You disassociate maybe, or you turn to something that's not situational. That's not that doesn't become threatened by every whim of life and circumstance. So could you call that happiness? I don't think I would, because the common connotation of happiness just isn't that. But I think that's what some people mean by it. So there is an underlying piece that is there all the time, for sure. And equanimity is really nice. Okay. All right. That's a good question. You guys are asking good questions today. Well, good in the sense that they're not super common questions. Okay. Message retracted. The mystery message. Bob Negri. In the last 3 days, I've been oscillating between thoughtless space and being on the thought train. Crazy, isn't it? When did we sign up for this? Curious experience. Why do I keep jumping back on the thought train? Well, you don't. Now you're not jumping back on it. You're not choosing it. You're not making it happen either. Just thoughts are coming and then they're subsiding. And then they're coming and then they're subsiding. It's okay. Doesn't say anything about realization, really per se. But that fluctuation, that's not uncommon at all. It's a very common thing to have happen. But if you back up a few questions with the non-doership, using that as a sort of guiding principle or litmus test, you could look at this and say, I didn't do anything to create those thoughts. They're just either there or they're not there. On my Facebook page yesterday, there's a Facebook page called Simply Always Awake, by the way, if anyone's interested. I post some memes, I post funny stuff, post baby animal pictures, but I also post videos. But yesterday it hit me and I just wrote it down this way. I put it on one of the posts, and it is one definition for equanimity is realizing, like really realizing and digesting it, that things don't go the way you want them to. That's just how it is. They also don't go the way you don't want them to. They just go the way they go. Period. That's it. Everything else is thought. Okay. All right. Anne, how to know if a speaker, teacher, gone all the way, so to speak, and doesn't matter? I don't think it matters that much, um, if they're deeply realized. If they can't, could it be more confusing? I don't want to be like an elitist with this stuff. I really don't, because you can learn from all kinds of people, situations. You can even learn from really dysfunctional people sometimes. So, you know, I do care about the question, and that's why I wrote the chapter. I think, Anne, you've probably read my book, but if you haven't, I have a chapter on it of how to find teachers. Someone told me, I think it was yesterday, actually, Josh. He said, he's like, I really want to tell you, like, you wrote that chapter you wrote about teachers. No one's ever done that before. No one's ever written stuff like that I've ever seen. And he thought he just wanted to tell me it was very valuable, and it's good to hear because it took me a while to write that, and I really sat with it, what I wanted to say there. But what I find happens often, if you have a teacher who may be very skilled, maybe clear, they've had an awakening, but maybe not liberation, right? And there's plenty of teachers out there like that. Many, 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 many. The majority of spiritual teachers, right? Um, they can help you a lot, right? A lot of the work is sometimes mundane emotion work, or I don't know about mundane, but it's not like extremely precise insight teachings or something. But what I find is that as people deepen their realization, sometimes you kind of outstrip the teacher in a way. And I don't mean this to be competitive with any teacher, but you just at some point your realization is just it's a hard thing to see, actually, because your teacher probably offered you so much, but there may be a time when you just need to move on from a certain teacher. You'll know it, and that's fine. A good teacher will tell you that too. You need someone else. Um, so But as far as how to assess that, my chapter is probably the clearest, far better than an answer I could give you here online. Lost my place. Let me find it again here. Heart Sutra video, another vote. Beautiful. You're welcome, Tina. Don't remember what the question was, but you're welcome. This kind of thing I do is so funny because it literally just disappears as soon as I'm talking or answering things. That's kind of how presence is. Okay. Oh, we met, but it was so fast towards the end. Yeah. All right. Mary Beth. Oh, that's cool. So Francis Lucille has a satsang at his place almost every Saturday in Temecula or Murrieta, California. Cool. I really like him. Very clear. Yvonne, children are great teachers for buried beliefs. Yeah. Inner child and shadow work. Totally. They hit buttons you weren't even aware. Linger around. That's right. They don't play by any rules. Bless their little hearts. R. Hicks. I had a Kundalini experience after intense grieving, but now it seems as if everything has stalled. If you feel up for it, if you feel like you want to really light the process on fire, I would consider the approaches in my book, like the second to last chapter, the inquiry chapter and the awakening chapter. I described sort of two approaches that kind of overlap: awakening through inquiry, self-inquiry often, or a one-pointed approach. But more importantly, I write about it and I try to give the flavor of how those felt, because I didn't know either of those approaches when it happened for me, but I damn well knew when it started happening. It's so instinctually obvious. Okay, devotion. Could you read my whole question? It's not religious, it's 12 step. Oh gosh, I have to go back up and find it. I answered a question that wasn't asked. Is devotional path useful? Not religious, but in the sense of handling will and power to a higher handing will and power to a higher power, whichever you choose, no matter what higher intelligence, being, Buddha, God, just. Yeah, I mean, I think I sort of answered it from my instinct on that. If it has to do with 12 step, um, yeah, the first admission, right, you have is I'm powerless to control this addiction, right? You do come to a place with awakening where I think it's close to awakening actually, when you're really in focused inquiry, where you realize that I'm powerless to force the awakening to happen. Well, of course you are, because you, as you take yourself to be, that agent is a thought, doesn't exist. And you start to sense something just vastly beyond you, you know damn well you're not going to control that. So you do notice, like, oh, I can't choose this. I can't make this happen. I am powerless. Powerless to force awakening, but in those moments, it doesn't seem like you're powerless to inquire. So stay with it. Do what you can do, and then let something else take over. Cool. Okay. Elena, I would like to be added to the Facebook group I learned during the you just have to find it. It's called Simply Always Awake. The group. Yeah, the group is called Awakening, Realization, and Liberation. And I think you just request and then you'll get added. The page is Simply Always Awake, where I post stuff. Roland, this whole process feels like the stages of death, but no one dies. Do you agree? Stages of death. Yeah, I agree. First stage, death of the thought based self. Okay, Ryan. I've always loved solving complex logical problems, and it's an important part of my job. Should I expect that my passion for this and my ability to do it will be reduced as I disidentify from thought? I know several programmers who are very deeply realized. They seem to do just fine. I would not be surprised though if outside of doing that, like just as a hobby, maybe a pastime or maybe a distraction, if that is less interesting to you over time, I wouldn't be surprised. But I think you'll be able to do your job fine. Especially you'll be able to take probably more creative approaches because coding tends to be well, there's a creative aspect to it, of course, but you might find a different dimension of creativity coming in. Thank you for my loving responses. We appreciate you so much. I appreciate you too. Okay. Devotion. I meant not religious in any way at all, but handling will and power. Handing will. Yeah. Yeah. That's what you do in awakening. It's unnamed and unknown. And yet the pathway to it, the breadcrumbs you follow are sort of a deeper instinctual knowing that's always been there that we've forgotten about through thought. But it will come to this place of something completely unknowable in the way we talk about knowing. I wonder if Kensho includes Barbie show. That's funny. John said, "Can you speak to the difference between awakening and liberation, please?" Yes, awakening is a first shift in identity, a fundamental shift in identity. Doesn't reverse, doesn't go back. It's not an experience. Um, but there's still a self structure there. Liberation is once the self structure is completely dissolved. The sense of self is gone. Um, then what suffering is laid bare for you to see very clearly. Not you, but it's seen clearly. And then it can be addressed directly. That's liberation. Was the woman Bernadette devotional who self desolated devotion? Whose desolated devotion? I can't remember the book. Okay. Bernadette Roberts. The funny thing about Bernadette Roberts is I don't know if she said this overtly, but what often happens with people who are very devotional religiously and not just believe in God, but that's even their fundamental experience moving them forward in the religious uh, spiritual process. At some point, and I'm going to call that point no self realization, all of it goes away because you see you were constructing that, you were using it to uphold the self. I know by her writing, I have no doubt that happened with her. However, she was a Catholic nun. So if you see later videos of her, she still does she's got like her habit or whatever, and she has like pictures of the cross and back and Jesus, and she'll talk about Jesus. But I can't know for sure, right? Yeah, I can't get in someone else's head, but um, the reason she would talk like that afterward is very different than the reason she talked like that before. The realization is uncompromising. Let's say it's unequivocal with the self structure not being there, which is not the same as non-duality, by the way. You can have non-dual realization and still have the self structure intact. It'll be far less powerful, enticing, but it's still there and it can rear its ugly head. Okay. Someone's on the death train. That's their name, death train. You've mentioned it in the past that you've experienced prior lifetimes working what the mind with the mind. What is continuous throughout these lifetimes? What happens to identity on death? These questions are fun. So when that's experienced, it's not experienced in any time frame at all. It's not experienced in the realm of time. So if you can track with that, then you'll understand when I say you realize there is no birth and no death, any more than there's a self, any more than there's time, any more than there's space. That's the direct answer. Is it valuable to write down your thoughts? I think it really can be, actually, especially if they're muddy. You're not sure what your beliefs are, what beliefs are, you kind of have a sense of what's going on, but you can't identify what is the belief here that's really holding me up or causing me to struggle, or, write it down. Write down all, just almost like flow of consciousness. You might be surprised what you find. Lisa said, "Thank you for your answer about thought storms. Do you think it's valuable to write?" Oh, sure. I just read that. Razi says, "Persistent belief. I don't know blank." And another belief. "Until I know, I cannot be okay." Wow. Yeah, those are so not true though, right? How to get out of this belief loop, which doesn't feel like a belief loop. It feels true. Well, there's a lot of ways you can approach this. You can ask yourself, um, has knowledge ever given me lasting peace? Knowing a new piece of information? Or is it like a temporary hit, right? You learn something interesting, makes you feel good for a moment or something, if you're an intellectual, I guess. Then nothing's really changed. Nothing's fundamentally changed. Then you look up some more information or you learn some more or whatever, right? So seeing that knowledge isn't going to deliver the goods. The belief thing is a little different because it's like we can get ourselves in this loop of believing that until certain beliefs are dispelled, until I see through a certain belief, awakening can't happen or something can't happen, in this whole spiritual spectrum. That's just inherently not true. People wake up without questioning any belief sometimes. People wake up with complete sets of erroneous beliefs intact. And over time, those beliefs will fall away. But it's not about organizing your beliefs, rearranging your beliefs, seeing through any specific belief. Now, there is a strategy of one by one, noticing every single thought and recognizing it as a thought, including thoughts that are kind of half hidden like a belief, and recognizing that's a thought. That's a strategy. It's an approach, but it doesn't force anything to happen. You can't force reality's hand. You can just do your best to make yourself open, to make yourself non-grasping onto thoughts in one moment. That's what the one-pointed approach is really about. It's really a pattern interrupt at a very deep level. The mind gets so focused that it has nothing to think about anymore. It gets very calm in this sort of very focused way, but alert, such that we're not getting re-identified with thought. When that happens, it's probably the most fertile ground for awakening that you can cultivate. Beyond that, it's grace. But you can go there. You can train yourself to do that. But part of it is just seeing, yeah, knowledge hasn't done the trick for me. You got to exhaust that sometimes and just realize didn't work. Works in the relative world. Being smart can get you things, right? Get you good jobs, get you money, get you respect. Being clever, you can figure things out, whatever. But this is not that. This isn't what we're talking about in the relative. This is it's kind of all or nothing. It's full on or nothing at all. You'll get to full on, but for a long time, or for a while, the ego tries to hold back, right? It's like, oh, I don't know. Wait. Let me think about something a little more. You get sometimes I think you just get used to you catch on to its tricks. You catch on to the mind's tricks of re-identifying. You're almost like, wait a minute. I don't want to think about that. I don't want to think about anything right now. Why don't I have that choice? Or do I? Okay. Good question. Robert asked or stated, the Buddha emphasized the freedom from lust and sexual desires in higher stages of awakening. What's your take on that? Yeah, it's an interesting one, right? I think you have to look at that stuff in its historical context. This the spiritual traditions in India, um, especially back then, were quite monastic in nature. They talked about arhats that were householders in the suttas, but so they acknowledge that. But I mean, the Buddha was a monk, and Buddha hung around monks and talked to tons of monks, and that was part of their deal. So a lot of this I think of is historical, um, and it's not a you don't have to become celibate to wake up. I'll just cut to the chase. You don't have to be celibate to wake up, and you don't have to be celibate to be liberated, for sure. So that's that. Can be, but you don't have to be. Frankie, can you say something about being taken or led by the process? Well, that's the grace, right? Um, it will take you. I've had this conversation a couple times with people where I'll be leading them into sort of unbound consciousness, one on one, talking to them, showing them how to do it. Because I can show anyone how to do it. It's just the question is, are they ready to do it? Because if they're not, they'll have a strong emotional reaction, and they may not be ready for that. So, but something in them may just want to not do it right then. It'd be like no. So I don't force that on people, but it does come up with some people on occasion, right, where they're asking me to do that. So I'll walk them into unbound consciousness in a very direct way. Um, and then often what I'll say is once they're there, I can tell they're just right there. I just encourage, like, there's nothing to do here. Don't do anything. A thought of doing is not just a thought. A thought of analysis of how you feel is just another thought. Just don't worry about the thoughts. Stay right here. And they do it. They can do it. And then sometimes I'll say, one time I said it, and I think it really freaked the person out, as I said, when you're wide open like this, at some point you may notice something that's completely beyond you. It may feel like an entity. It may not feel like an entity. It may not feel like anything personal at all, but it will feel like something that's just completely beyond your power. It's beyond your dimension. Will come in. You'll feel it coming into the experience. Um, and I think I say that to probably just so it doesn't freak them out so much. It doesn't scare people. But one time it scared somebody. I said that, but it's true. It's not like it doesn't feel like an entity. I don't think it's just something. My Zen teacher would use this analogy. It's like a chicken, like a chick inside an egg, and then the mother bird. The chicken pecks from the inside a little bit, but it can't really get itself out. The mother has to help it by poking from the outside. But of course, when the eggshell cracks, the little baby finds itself in a completely different world than it thought it was in, right? Much more vast. But that pecking from the outside is also important. And it does happen. You feel it. You feel something becoming almost automatic about things, about the process. Automatic, but again, focused, singular, clear, not just mind wandering. More and more have no sense of what's coming or even what I am doing. Yeah. Can't say the sense of I is gone. Wish it were. LOL. Kind of blipping in and out. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, there's nothing you can do really right now. You can remain alert enough to notice thoughts, anything that's starting to seemingly shape a view. catch it early, feel what there is to feel when it comes, emotions. But yeah, this is good. Being led by the nose. Yeah, that's right. I love the way you speak positively about other speakers, so generous and loving. I've never heard that from other speaker teachers because, well, there's some, if I don't mention them at all, I may not have the most positive things to say. So there are some people out there who I would never encourage you to go see because they're fraudulent, and there's cults out there, right? So I don't say it about everybody, of course, but if I mention someone, I know they've really helped people. So yeah, I mean, but the real reason I do it is because everybody is a little different, right? Every practitioner, whatever, you're just a little different. So maybe listening to me or someone, Adyashanti or someone, doesn't do it, but you go to a Francis Lucille satsang and breaks you open. I joke about Tony Parsons all the time and the way he speaks and stuff like that, but it's also very potent. It works for a lot of people. So, give it a shot. There's so many different ways people can communicate this. Some will give practices, some won't at all. So, they say things all different ways. They transmit differently. Everybody's different. So I try to be broad in my offering with that of like, hey, try different things, see what really resonates with you. It's helpful to stay with something. Sometimes there's this question of like, is it good to bounce around with teachers to different things and all the different practices? Or should you just stay, should you dig one well into depth until the water comes, or should you dig a bunch of wells? Um, there's no exact answer to that, but I think it's valuable to sample for a while. If you really feel inclined to have a one-on-one, maybe not one-on-one, but if you feel inclined to have a formal relationship with a teacher, excuse me, with a teacher, then yeah, you can sort of narrow things at that point. But it is a weird thing that sometimes teachers will even use to like guilt people into not seeing other teachers. Like I don't buy that at all. I don't say that to anyone. People even that I would work with one on one, which I still do sometimes. I work with people one on one, but I'll still tell them like, "Oh, check out this, check out that." I send them videos from other teachers or different, because there's so many ways to point and talk about this stuff. Um, yeah. Yes, it was Bernadette Roberts that wrote The Experience of No Self. Razi, clarifying question above. Decision making. I believe there is an I that has to make the right decision. Yeah. But another belief, there's no self that makes those are both just beliefs. Those are thoughts, right? Those are thoughts. There's a thought that says there's an I that makes decisions, and there's a thought that says there's no I, there's no doer. They're both beliefs. So that's why I always make the contrast between belief and realization, belief and insight. We could talk everything I'm saying can be talk, right? People can say it to one another and believe it and stuff, but it's not realization. So the insight has to be direct. Um, so for now, put it on the shelf. I don't know if there's an I that's making choices or not. They're both thoughts. But why do you need to know, right? Do you need to know? Do you need to know something about doership to be realized? No. At some point, it just becomes obvious. That's the best way I can say it with all of these qualities of realization that we talk about and that people tend to ask about, right? Oh, past lives and doership and all this stuff. It's like, don't worry about it. You know, just keep to your own practice, your own investigating a presence now, letting go when it feels natural, investigating the emotion in the moment. Just keep at it, and these things will become very obvious at some point, and you won't have much. Just you won't care at that point anyway. Yeah. Okay. I'm just checking the time here. I have a little bit of time left, but not much. Oh, the Facebook group. Okay, I'll look at it and approve it. Kieran, love it. Thank you. Ryan, causality seems fundamental, but we don't directly experience it, do we? Causality and the way we think about it is an illusion of the mind, for sure. Think of it this way. Try to imagine causality without imagining time. If you can feel into that deeply enough, it might give you some insight. If you have the time, can you lead us in unbound consciousness right now? Is there a meditation on your channel regarding unbound consciousness? There's a whole playlist on consciousness on my channel. Check it out. Good to see you. Are you familiar with self-parenting or ideal parent meditations? There's a psychologist that advocates it, Dan Brown. I've heard of Dan Brown. Seems helpful. I don't know a lot about it, but like so many things, like I was saying a minute ago, they just dawn on you. So much about human nature and internal parenting, and the psychological components of the family dynamic that go on in the mind as echoes from childhood is so obvious. Um, so if someone were to make that into a practice or a meditation or a process, I think it's going to be probably pretty powerful if it's coming from a good place. I'm sure with Dan Brown it is. What is your view, or is there any reality to Buddha, Raman, Christ, Nisargadatta, etc., past beings, or is it just stories or imagination? Oh, you mean like in the relative world, did they exist physically? I think they did, probably, right? Certainly Nisargadatta. Christ, I think almost certainly there was someone. Buddha, yes, I think. Raman, I don't know who that is. That's relative world, though. Hmm. Okay. We can do a short meditation on consciousness. And then I'm going to close her, shut her down. So the key with meditating in and with consciousness is finding your way into consciousness, into the space of consciousness to start, which isn't challenging. It's where thoughts are. So where's the thought right now? Could be an I thought. Could be a fundamental I thought. It could be the feeling of I am. Find it. Find that thought. When I say find it, I don't mean analyze its exact position in some cognitive way. Don't start thinking about it. Just become aware of it. However it is, wherever it is, whatever degree of clarity is there, that's it. Very simple. So that's where we start. Any other thought that's coming and going, that's fine too. Attention can move right to it. It could be a sense of I or I am, and within that, there's subtle thoughts coming and going, images, visual images, or just narratives. So we just let it kind of percolate, move the way consciousness tends to. Now, maybe moving very quickly, like a bubbling brook, you know, that's the thought storms. But so once we've done this first step, which is just touching into that space and sort of making the commitment to remain there as we meditate to the degree we can, which is remaining is easy. It's just a matter of keeping some attention on those bubbling thoughts or the sense of I or I am. It's fine. Or the thought that says, well, wait a minute, which is it? Is it I am or is it whatever thought comes? It's just a thought. And we're just noticing the thoughts. Something like clouds, maybe swirls and eddies in a pool of water, maybe. But, there's no need to imagine what I just said. I just mean that's the overall feel of it sometimes. So we're here, we've touched in, identified consciousness. Second step is we're going to just dilate our attention in the space of consciousness itself. What that means is that wherever it feels like a thought is forming, specifically a thought, I'm not talking about sounds and body sensations right now. I'm talking about thoughts. Wherever a thought might be forming, whether it's behind the eyes, behind the head, in front, above, below, wherever it feels like it is, we're open to it. The aperture of attention in this space is wide, fully wide. So it might feel like some movement. Tension might be feeling like it sort of bounces around here and there to the peaks of the thought experience on top of the ocean of consciousness. That's the second step. It's like we want a thought to come if it's going to, because the moment we recognize it, then there's no tendency to identify. They might sound like fragments of sentences or fragments of narratives, even. As soon as they're noticed, they often subside or quiet down a lot. But this can be any way it is. It can be any way it needs to be right now, this space. We're not taking notes. For taking notes about how to get back here later, that's a thought and you're identified with it. Just notice, oh, that's a thought. Okay, where was that? Then you might notice, oh, my aperture wasn't fully open. It was kind of hiding in this seeming sense of the view of me. So open it wider. Now we're not fighting anything off. So if sounds start to creep in as well, that's fine. Sensations, whatever's here is fine. But primarily we're interested in thought and consciousness and remaining alert to any thoughts stirring, moving, forming, disforming. We're alert, but we have a completely neutral stance. We're not pushing or pulling, judging, or recording any thought. And often this just gets sort of quiet, neutral. Be alert for the thoughts that say, oh, wait, I'm not sure. I think I have it. I'm not sure if I have it. That's a thought. It's not you. That's a thought. Just one of the thoughts of the many percolating in and on this ocean of consciousness. Yeah, I'll keep it simple like this because if you can follow those steps, once you lead yourself here, that's it. It's not, if you're thinking, oh, where's my awakening, or when's that gonna thought. So this is very simple. Can be a little elusive for a while, but once you dial in, it's simple. So if you feel this, great. If you forget how to do it, just come back and watch this. And I do recommend, if this works for you, to do this as part of your practice daily. If you have a daily meditation practice, do it for 20 minutes. It quiets the polarities in the mind and thought. And we'll dissolve them over time with enough staying here. Polarities meaning beliefs, views, etc. So that's it. Cool. Thank you, everyone. Now, before I go, I want to say there's a retreat happening that I've only announced to the members so far. So you may have all seen it. I announced it yesterday. But it's going to fill, it's already filling sort of quick. So it's going to fill up really fast once I announce it widely, which means to my email list and then publicly. In fact, me saying this here will announce it publicly when this goes live, but this won't go live for like 5 hours. For some reason, YouTube lives always take a long time to process. So if you're interested, check out the community tab that I wrote yesterday. It's a retreat in May of 2024. It's going to be freaking awesome. It's the bare bones of it are like what I usually do because I'm doing the Q&A, I'm doing the guided meditation and talks like I always do. So my interactions are the same. But here's the thing about it. It's at a Kentucky castle, which is an amazing place. I have all kinds of other modalities there. That's what's so different than my usual retreats. You have Q&As also with small groups. So Violet will be there. Josh will be there. Alma will be there. Chris, all 4 of them. Well, everyone in this retreat will have an opportunity to do small group with them, Q&A. We have large group activities, which include a breathwork workshop with a really awesome breathwork guy. So doing breathwork in a room of 100 people is going to be awesome. We have some movement with another guy who does hypnosis. And then the inside circle people are coming from the documentary I love so much called The Work. So it's going to be awesome. So if you go to this, you'll get a whole day with the inside circle. Like you and your group will be with them for an entire day. It's going to be awesome. So check out the community tab if that's something you're interested in doing. Otherwise, I don't really have any specific announcements at this time. I do have an audiobook out in case people didn't notice, but it's the link is under my videos. So thank you, everyone. Thank you. You guys are awesome. Thanks for your support as always. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Patty. Thank you, Badillion. Thank you, Donna, Ashley, Mary Beth, Rozzy, Ulala, Badillion again. Signed up? Yes. It's going to be so awesome. I just can't even tell you. It's going to be amazing. The other retreats I do are similarly awesome, but they're quiet. They're silent retreats, very deep samadhi, all that sort of thing. This is like, you want to do emotion work. You want to have like multimodal, extravaganza of exploring your identity in every way possible. That's what this is. Thanks, Caroline. Thanks, Robert. Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Judy. Thanks, Jean. Thank you, Yvonne. Enlighten Will. Thank you, Tony. Thanks. Main Focus. Thank you. I forgot your actual name. Tom. Vasilikos. Marvin. Ryan. Jean. Brian. Thank you, everyone. Zen Ghost. John. Anne. Yeah, so Zen Ghost, if you're signing up now, I think there's still an early bird. There may only be a couple left. First 25 people who signed up, you can type in large characters, early bird, one word, and it gives you I think like a 15% discount. It's pretty big. But check the community tab if you're interested. What is the community tab? You got to go to my main page, my main channel. And I think you just click on my face to go to that. You'll see my main channel where it has my playlists below. There's a bunch of tabs. And towards the right, there's one that says community. And the community tab is where I post mostly to the members. And you should see it from yesterday. The community tab is also where you look for announcements for these things, by the way. Inside Circle's coming. That's right. Direct link. I don't know about that for Facebook. If you don't use Facebook, I think you probably not. I have Instagram and I have TikTok. I don't know if you use those. You're welcome. You're welcome, Saranish. You're welcome, Frankie, Jeannie, Arnaud, Marcy, Peter. Thank you, everyone. You're all awesome. Enjoy your weekend.